Okay. Hello, everyone. Thanks for joining our session. I actually wanted to double thank you guys because let's face it, it's the third day of the summit already. It's Las Vegas. It's late evening. The happy hours are already started. We're already aware of that. I mean, as Lady Gaga says, you had millions of reasons to ditch us, but I guess you had your one good reason to be here, and that's migration, I guess. By the show of hand, how many of you are from overseas? Do we have anybody from overseas? Welcome. I assume the rest of you are from the United States. Do we have any locals from Las Vegas? I mean, this light doesn't let me. Anyways, welcome. I mean, how many of you have planned your trips in person? You did it yourself. Really, only you? So I guess the rest of you just had the luxury of an executive assistant doing the traveling for you? Good for you. I'm really impressed. I mean, regardless of who did this for you, there are a few things that you needed to clear out before being here. First off, you needed to know where you're going, why you're going, when are you going, how are you going, how much money are you allowed to spend, what's your budget, do you need any accommodations? All of those answers, regardless of whether you're planning for a fairly short trip like this or a rather longer journey, need some decent answer before we can actually have a meaningful and successful meeting. And today I, Sasan Hajrasuliha, a senior AWS solutions architect specialized in infrastructure modernization and migration, along with my peers Mangesh Bukle and Adi Simon, are going to show you how you can get data-driven answers to the same questions when it comes to your digital journey of migrating your workloads to AWS with the focus of Microsoft-based workloads. First, we're going to talk a little bit about a generic portfolio of what a typical migration would look like. We're going to talk about discovery. Then we're going to go deeper into each categories of portfolio of workloads that you might be running on your environment. The demos are all blended. We're going to have an engaging session, so let's hit it. You guys here, because most probably your organization is one of these organizations that still have workloads that includes this 70% of workloads that are still running on premises. Why you want to move to the clouds? Again, you could have a million reasons to move out there. The latest addition to this mix is embracing AI, ML in general, and generative AI in particular. But we know that you need answers to the question that I brought up again, and we know that those answers are not easily got. The main thing is resource scarcity. That resource could be human resources, it could be budget, it could be timing, it could be the skill set. We know that you need to be able to figure those out before you can have a successful migration. I mean, when you look back at the journey that people have already gone through, you see some milestones out there. First, I mean, in the late 90s and early 2000s, everybody was just running their workloads in their server room in their office. Then they decided to embrace the commercial data centers and the concept of co-location. Moving forward to 2005, it was the early days of cloud. People started to embrace more of what cloud had to offer. And we had different milestones moving forward. And right now, our milestone is Gen AI, moving to the cloud for AI and by AI. Maybe in 2023, when you were thinking about Gen AI with your projects, you were just thinking of having your prompt somewhere, getting some feedback, getting some recommendations from your model, and then implementing it manually. Then came 2024. Now you could get better, more contextual prompts to the AI model using systems like RAG and augmented retrievals and more streamlined experience, but still everything was manual. And now at 2025, we want the AI to not just tell us what to do. We want it to do things for us, of course, under our supervision and under our security guidelines. And that's what agentic AI means. And we're going to show you how we can leverage that for our migration project. I mean, for a typical journey, one of the trivial questions that you already know the answer is, where am I coming from? You already know where you are. But in a digital journey like migration, that is actually a question that needs to be answered. What are we migrating and what do I have? And that would be the concept of discovery. Our primary go-to mechanism to answer that question has always been, and still is, this mechanism that we call optimization and licensing assessment, or OLA, as the acronym goes. Through this process, us as AWS, along with our partners, we would come to your environment, we'll scan your environment with our tools, we see the relationships that you had with different vendors, and we would come up with recommendations, including licensing recommendations from different vendors. Whether it's a good choice for you to use the bring your own license scenario versus going and purchasing license included. These are the answers that we will have for you if you go through the OLA. If you're interested in this topic, we have some resources that we're going to share with you towards the end of the session. The question is there an alternative way of doing it? And the answer is yes. I mean, you probably have already heard about this service that we put a lot of emphasis on, and it's called AWS Transform. It's an umbrella of services and modules that will help you at each step of your way towards your migration. It can actually help you with assessments as well. You would feed it your inventory data. Many of the common and popular formats are supported, but it's a generative AI. Most probably, if there's the format that you understand, most probably our Gen AI will understand it as well. So it gets your inventory data, and based on the other supporting data that you possibly can feed into it, you will get some insight into it. Let's actually see what it works in action, how it works in action. So starting with the familiar face, your vCenter. I have a cluster of 2 ESXi hosts with a bunch of virtual machines running on them. They're hosting a plethora of applications with different environments. Like, for example, this one is a travel expense application with 3 tiers of architectural element into it. I'm going to use AWS Discovery tool. This is our own tool for discovery. The first time I'm going to run it, it requires a new password. I'm going to put my password here. This is the interface for it. The first thing I'm going to do is to give it access to my vCenter environment so that it can inventory my virtual environment. The moment I type it in, as you see at the bottom, the agent starts scanning the environment. But that I want more. I want dependency mapping data as well as SQL versions that I can later on optimize. And this is why I'm going to give credentials to the guest via virtual machines so that they can go deeper and talk to the virtual machines themselves. Again, the moment that I do that, the database discovery and network discovery agents, they'll kick in too. And as you see, each one of them has different refresh cycle. Every hour for VMs, every 24 hours for databases, and every 15 seconds to be able to grab that network dependency mapping data. Already we got some information here. Let's see what we have for our inventory. This is the same environment that you saw through the vCenter. Some of them, as you see, they have errors because the credentials were different, but for whatever reason, we can actually download the inventory in a zip file. If you look at the name, it says 28 days. That's how long we recommend that you keep running this tool. Logging into AWS Transform. This is Identity Center. Plethora of identities providers are supported. This is the front page for our AWS Transform. As you see at the bottom, we have some customer testimonies and some what's new and those topics. First thing we need to do is to create a workspace. A workspace is just a space that holds on to all the activities you need to do for a specific migration project. Okay, we created our workspace. Now we go in. As you see, we have some suggested prompts on the right with the categories of migration tasks that you can select. I can directly type in the category, the action that I want to do to the model, and it will open up a proper job for me. There it is, it's suggesting. I accept this suggestion for the job names and all that. And here's where the actual action happens. Humans in the loop. Now it's asking me for the inventory data that I got from the previous step. I'm going to upload my zip file. And I'm going to choose my destination region as the possible target for my migration and hit analysis. While it's processing my data, I can see what the model is doing through the workload. It's showing me what the model is doing. We have the artifacts, everything that we fed into the model, as well as whatever the model generated for us will be in the artifacts. There are some collaboration features within AWS Transform. And of course, the main panel will be the job panel. Each step that is done, there's a checkbox. The yellow means human in the loop, and this one is still working. While it's working, I can ask for anything, for a status update, for example, in this example. It's giving me some example that these are the actions that have been done. These are the left ones. And of course, in the middle, this is done. Let's see what this assessment has provided for us. The first thing is a PDF report of an executive summary, pretty much. What is our prediction of the savings we'll get on the cloud? What are an overview of our recommendations? All that in a nice human-readable format. You'll get the same information as part of a PowerPoint presentation as well that you can use as a basis for your presentations if you're a partner to your customers or to somebody in your hierarchy. All those data is already populated there. You can use that. And the meat of our assessment is the Excel spreadsheet. Here, you would see that all those inventory data that we fed into, now we have a line-by-line analysis of them. The server name, the storage attached to them, the specs, the recommendation that we have for you on which instance type to move it, and of course, estimate of each one line by line with a separation of licensing versus compute. All those will remain in your workspace even when your job is done. And you can come back to it and use these artifacts again when you're creating other jobs for the next steps of your migration. As you see here, the dependency mapping and all that, we can use them later on for other steps of our migration. Great. Now we know that we have discovered our environment, and we know that our workloads most probably fall under one of these categories with regards to specifically Microsoft-based workloads. Servers and VMs, anything generic. You think about your infrastructure servers as well as generic application servers. If you're a Microsoft shop, 95% of chance that you are using Active Directory as your identity and access management. SQL databases has always been the database of choice for Microsoft-based development. Same thing with .NET when it comes to Windows and web applications. You might already be on your pathway for modernization, maybe through some containerization features that you see out there, and the file storage. For those of you who are familiar with our terminology, we have this concept of 7 R's of migration. The real ones are those that are highlighted, of course. Rehost, just lifting and shifting it to another host. Replatform, using the same technology, but maybe offloading some management elements to a third-party provider, in our case, AWS. And refactoring means just decomposing the application and creating it new to be able to grab as much of the cloud-native features as possible. Now let's dive deep into each category. First one, servers and VMs. By the show of hands, how many of you are not using VMware? That's what I thought. Oh, actually, we have 2. That's great. OK, so for the rest of you who do, we have plenty of sessions covering this new service that we have called Amazon Elastic VMware Service, or EVS. For this session, it's just enough to say that we will give you the ESXi host in your account, and then you can use the technologies you're already familiar with to migrate your VMware virtual machines to AWS. We're not going to go deeper than this into this. The generic service that we have for migration and for the lift and shift, it has been around for a while, and it has been called Application Migration Service, or MGN. This is a service that installs a little agent on your source servers. Then it transfers blocks of zeros and ones to your staging environment in your own account. When you're ready for the cutover, either test cutover or final production cutover, we will hydrate EC2 instances based on the launch templates you defined for each server. And then you'll have a replica of your on-premises servers running on AWS. There is a minor revision to that as well. In that case, for the on-prem environment, if you're using VMware, you don't need to install agents individually on each server, but rather you rely on a central appliance to do the replication for you. And we rely on VMware's snapshot technologies to get those deltas of zeros and ones to us. Regardless of which one you would use, MGN is just the engine. When you're doing the migration at scale, you need to be able to orchestrate, to do wave planning, and make sure that the dependencies are met. So far, these were the services that you would be using to track your scaled migration project. But now we've taken all those experiences and has put them in the AWS Transform for VMware migration category. And our mighty Mangesh here will go deeper into that.
Thank you, Sasan. Hello, everyone. Mangesh here. So let's continue the server migration journey. So we are living in an artificial intelligence era. So speed matters and how we work. Large migrations are complex, takes time, it's error prone, and require a lot of efforts and coordination. So raise your hand if you believe the agentic AI has a potential to transform your traditional migration processes. Great, you're right. With that, I'm excited to talk about our first agentic AI service, AWS Transform for VMware, which simplify moving your servers from your environment to Amazon EC2 with minimum human oversight using our goal-driven specialized agents, which we have built with the 70+ years of our experience. This new UI provides you more flexibility and AI-first chat-driven experience throughout your migration process. So let's see how it works. So flexibility starts with you are onboarding the transform using your own choice of identity, whether it's Okta, Intra, or maybe AWS Identity Center. It has a key 4 phases. Starts with the discovery, where you can provide your VMware information using your choice of tools, whether it's RV tools, or maybe if you're using a partner like a Cloudamize or Modelize IT, or the Sasan already explained you our tool called AWS Transform for Discovery tool. That is what we recommend you. Once Transform agent has this all analysis of your environment, then that agent will group your servers into different waves and applications. Now, you can work with the agent to guide them, to group them based off your business or technical constraint, like example application, owner-based functions, department, or maybe OS or IP subnets. Transform agent also understands your source network, and it translates that into AWS-specific networking components like VPC, subnet, and more, and provide you the CloudFormation and CDK template, which you can download, make the appropriate changes as you want, and you can do your deployment. If you are using any third-party tools for the firewall, like a Cisco ACI, or maybe a FortiGate or Palo Alto, which is normally customer use, or maybe NSX-driven your networks, you can import that information in Transform and for the more context. Transform agent also give you the different design options when you deploy, whether it's a hub and spoke model or it's a isolated VPC, and now it supports the multiple flexible IP address mapping, along with the different multiple accounts deployment, and that is very much required for large migrations. Once Transform agent has these all networking information and waves and planning and everything, it goes to the next phase, which is a migration phase, where it will orchestrate end-to-end your migration using behind-the-scene AWS MGN service, which Sasan explained. Now, Transform can migrate your servers not only from VMware, but if you have a Hyper-V, KVM, or maybe your physical servers, it can do that for you. Important thing is about human in loop. It's very important, where it creates that balance between end-to-end automation and human oversight, so that you can provide the user input on every critical task throughout this migration process. And it creates that unified web collaborative experience, so that your teams enable to do the streamline communication, resolve the blockers quickly, and avoid this coordination delays which are normally comes across all large migrations. Now, with that, do we have any alternative method to do the large migrations? So as I told, large migrations are complex, time taken, but also large migrations communicate with different data sources, different services, tools. They have a number of pre-migration tasks, post-migration tasks. These are the normal scenarios actually. So how you overcome that? We have already one proven service called Cloud Migration Factory, which customers are using to migrate thousands of servers at scale, at a time, right? But question here is, can we take this to the next level, considering we are now living in an AI era? So how it works, how we work is matters most. Example, I'm saying, can I use AI agent to ask AI agent to analyze my flow chart, migration flow chart, which I have in my mind, right? And ask agent to analyze this, work with the Cloud Migration Factory, and create these all pipelines and automation jobs to do the end-to-end migration. And I will be, as a human and expert, will make sure that agent is doing right. Yes, it is possible. With Kiro CLI as an agent, now in this case, my migration agent assistant can work with Cloud Migration Factory to create all these pipelines and everything which I draw in my picture as a migration, right, which I want to do, with the help of MCP server, which is a model context protocol server, which has all the required tools to communicate with the Cloud Migration Factory. And Cloud Migration Factory between, if you see the automation engine, that is nothing but what? That is already pre-built automation using MGN. So you can understand MGN service is now so critical, which Sasan explained. It's used in all our services. It's a behind the scene. Can you take this enhance more? Yes. You can take the advantage of AWS Transform now, which I think Sasan explained as an assessment to do the assessment for the large data centers, or you can use the wave planning and everything out of that and then import that into Cloud Migration Factory to consider. Now, you may have a question, what about the pre-task and pro-task, right? So you can take the advantage of our Amazon Bedrock Agent Core, where you can build your own migration agent to handle the task for you. Example, ticket creation, Jira stories, or maybe after migration DNS updates, or many more things which you know, email communication. All these things you can handle through our secure platform Agent Core. So now let's see this in action. Okay. So this is the WordPress application which we want to migrate. Okay. This is just a servers, multiple servers. One of them is obviously WordPress servers. This is just on-premises to AWS. This is the Cloud Migration Factory which I already deployed to save the time, but this is a blank factory. If you see, it's a zero. Zero servers, zero applications, everything. I launched my Kiro as my AI agent, and now this is the MCP tool which is having all the tools for the Cloud Migration Factory, right, which it will use. This is the agent core where I have built migration agents, right, one for ticket creation, one for email communication. And this is the flowchart I was talking about. Like, there are some manual tasks, automated tasks, and simple flowchart, starting with the ticket and ending with the notification in between migration steps. Now, this is the prompt I gave to AI agent. Go and analyze this JPG file which I have shown you before, and do the job for me, create the pipelines, work with the cloud migration factory and work with that. So that is what exactly now it is trying to do now. It is creating that all pipeline behind the scene with the cloud migration factory using MCP protocol. As you can see now, it is doing that. And then it will also ask you for the inventory of your servers, which you can take from Transform or your own inventory in the CVS format. You can give it to that. In our case, we have 3 applications, 5 servers, and 2 waves created. So if you go now Cloud Migration Factory UI, you see that 2 waves, 5 migration, and 5 servers, and 3 applications. This is the UI, but you can ask this status from Kiro also, like agent. What is my status of the migration? And now you can see that it will also try to create a wave 1, because that is the one I'm showing in the demo to migrate the WordPress servers, right? This is the UI of the Cloud Migration Factory where you can control the things also, but we want to control through AI. So if you go back now, yes, you can ask, what is the status of my migration? It will go, but if you see that migration is not started, why? Because there was one manual process previously, that ticket creation. It's asking, provide the ticket. So it's understand manual versus automated. Now we are providing that, yeah, I have a ticket. Now it's going to go all follow my flow chart and do the migration for me behind the scene using MGN. So if you see now in the UI, that this is install the replication agents behind the scene, started the block level migration, and step by step it will follow all the process, test instance creation, test and then cut over, and then deploy the production instances. All it will do for me. Example, if you see there were 2 new migrated servers are there. And now I can just ask, what is the status there? Everything looks good. It's demo, but there may be failures also you can ask, possible. Now you can see all the pipeline here. Again, the main motive is what? We don't want to do multiple UIs. Cloud Migration Factory, MGN. I just want to check everything. You can see notification, and I got the notification. This is the application from new migrated server, and this is overall status. So this is how fast you can work now with the AI, right? You can ask these questions, and in this it's everything works fine, but in case reality, maybe it will fail. It will not able to install the agents. You can work back and forth with AI agent and ask why it's not, why it's failed, and you can fix it using natural language communication. That is the main intention of it. So again, we have covered how you can do the server migration. We have a multiple ways to do that. I will suggest work backwards from your own requirements, whether it's a technical and business, and see what solution best works for you. Example, AWS Transform, maybe Cloud Foundation Factory, or maybe our partners and services tools. Okay? So let's see now, change the topic to core service Active Directory. How many of you are using Active Directory? Almost maybe all, right? This is the most used application across industry, and a very critical application we are thinking about the migration. So let's see what are the design options we have. We have our native 3 options on AWS. The first is a self-managed EC2 domain controllers. When I say self-managed, means in this model, you are responsible for managing this domain controller, whether it's managing, monitoring, or maintaining throughout the life cycle of the DCs. The key point on this is, if you can extend your own domain to my EC2. If you have 50,000 or maybe 100,000 of users, you can extend that easily with the AD replication and start giving authentication to your migrated application. This is the fastest way you can start doing, and most of the customers do this. Second option we have is a AWS managed AD. As managed, this is managed by us. We deploy Active Directory for you and behind the scene domain controllers, so you don't require to worry about the undifferentiated heavy lifting of the domain controller. We manage that for you. And this is an enterprise ready service, so it comes with the seamless integration with AWS applications, maybe enhanced features like directory sharing or replication and everything. But the key point on this service is, when you deploy the Active Directory, you deploy as a single for a single domain new single for a single domain. That means what? You cannot extend your existing domain to the managed AD. So if you want to provide the authentication, you need to create a trust relationships, like one-way or two-way trust relationship, depends upon your use case. Third is the active AD connector. AD connector is not an active directory. This is like a gateway, or maybe I will say simple term, it's like a bridge between your on-premises active directory and AWS specific application which supports the AD connector to provide the authentication and lookups. This is one-to-one relationship, so you may end up deploying multiple AD connectors. Just make sure that you use the unit service account to avoid the blast radius issues. Now these options are used by our customers over the time, across the segment, whether it's a government, education, finance, life science, healthcare. I am supporting these customers to deploy the Active Directory from long time, and we get the feedback. They are looking for a solution, managed solution on AWS, which is a flexible and easy to maintain, and also get the managed experience like the managed AD, but they can able to extend their own domain to managed AD, which is not possible right now, right? So that they don't require to do the trust relationships or maybe actual migration from their own domain to managed AD, which is a big project, as you guys know already. It's so difficult to do the AD migration. With that, as you guys know, most of our services and features comes from your feedback. So I'm excited to talk about our new service, AWS Managed AD Hybrid Edition. Now, in this service, you can extend your existing domain to Managed AD Hybrid Edition so that you can take the advantage of managed experience, because we manage the domain controllers this for you, right? And same thing like the EC2, you can quickly start giving the authentication to your migrated applications. How you design this? If you have a domain controllers on premises, you can just extend that as an additional domain controllers on managed AD. Just make sure it is onboarded with the system manager is one of the prerequisites. If you have a EC2 domain controllers, you just extend that now to hybrid AD. So, but in this case, hybrid AD domain controllers, which is your domain only, is managed by us, but EC2 and on-premises is managed by you. So it's a co-management now between us. So let's see this in action, how this works actually, new service. So if you see now, these are the two domain controllers I have already migrated from my on-premises. This is onboarded with the system manager. This is important thing to notice, the OU structure. You can see this is your OU structure, right? And these are self-managed domain controllers by you. This is the secret we need to create, because we need some access to your domain to add the additional domain controllers. So we created the secret. And these are very specific name secret. This is documented in our website. These needs to be these same names. And once your secrets are there, your domain controllers are onboarded with the system manager, now you see the new option here in the managed AD hybrid edition, along with the normal our managed AD. Provide all the domain information, in DNS networking is very important behind the scene, provide all that. Now you can see the two domain controllers which you have provided, which is minimum requirement. Minimum 2 you need to provide us to use that for the additional domain controller deployment. And everything looks good, but you cannot install, we are not installing hybrid AD directly. We are creating the assessment. Why? Because we need to make sure that whatever domain controllers you have provided to us is healthy, working fine. So behind the scene, we are going to check 38 tests we are going to run, which is very simple AD specific test like resolution, replication, to make sure they are healthy. And this assessment we are going to use successful, which is another prerequisite to create the hybrid domain controllers. And now you have to provide the service account. You can see the service account which we have created. And then once everything looks good, all the information is good, now you can say that create the hybrid directory. So behind the scene, what we are going to do is now, we are going to deploy the domain controllers for you in our account, obviously, and just going to manage by us. And you can see now IP hyphen. So the IP hyphen is domain controller deployed by us for your domain, but managing. And the OU structure, you can see now new two OUs are added, AWS reserved. So that is what exactly managed by us. All other is your domain anyway. And 2 domain controllers by yourself, and total, if you see now, there are 4 domain controllers. So you can see the 2 are managed by you and 2 are managed by us under the co-management with this. And if you go to the actual directory and see that, you know, all looks like successful, everything, and assessment is also successful. If you click now the domain, you will see this is a managed AD kind of experience where you can see the managed application management and all that. So you get that managed experience now. With that, I will hand over to Adi for the next journey over.
Through Active Directory. Now, as part of customers' migration journey, the next workload that is most commonly talked about are database and application. Can I get a raise of hand if you run Microsoft SQL Server today? Okay, great, most of you. All right, so my name is Adi. I'm going to talk to you about your database layer and application layer. Let's get started with SQL Server. Okay, now let's try to understand what are your options to run SQL Server on AWS. The first option is rehost onto SQL Server on EC2. Now, this gives you the most flexibility in terms of SQL Server editions, SQL Server versions, and you have a very familiar admin experience and full control of your SQL Server. Now, you can choose license included or BYOL if you meet the eligibility requirements. But full control comes with full responsibility. That means you are responsible for managing everything on EC2 except for the physical infrastructure. So what if you're thinking, is there a way to offload this operational overhead? The answer is yes. You can re-platform to our managed database solution, which is Amazon RDS for SQL Server. With this, you get the managed experience. We optimize the architecture for you. AWS automates the patching backup. You also get the high availability if you opt for multi-AZ, and license is also included in this option. We also have a third option called RDS Custom for SQL Server. This is where if you have a use case where you need to access the operating system to install things like third-party agents such as your security agents, your monitoring log forwarder, this can be done with RDS Custom. Now that you know what is your destination when it comes to SQL Server on AWS, let's talk about the approaches for you to get there. What are the migration approaches? I'm going to present to you 4 very common approaches, and the first one is to use MGN, Application Migration Service, which Sasan and Mangesh have already talked about, to do a full lift and shift from your SQL Server, be it on-prem or on other clouds, onto SQL Server on EC2. This does block level replication. So that means everything, including your database, operating system, data, configurations, they all come along onto EC2. Very simple, good for lift and shift, good for individual database. The next approach is going to be very familiar for all of you database administrators out there, native backup and restore. So with this approach, what you do is you back up your SQL Server as usual, then you upload the backup file onto our storage services such as Amazon S3 or FSx, then you restore them onto either EC2, RDS, or RDS Custom. But one caveat of this is that you got to take into account downtime, because backup and restore undoubtedly involves some downtime. So what if you want an approach that minimizes the downtime? Well, if you run a clustered environment today and you're taking advantage of built-in high availability features, such as your always-on availability group, failover cluster instance, log shipping, what you can do is you can spin up an EC2 instance with SQL Server on it, and then add that as an additional node in your existing cluster. Let the node synchronize, all of your data comes along, and once you're ready, you perform a controlled failover on your source database. Finally, when you're ready, you can decommission your source database. So this is great if you run a clustered environment, but this only works if you're coming onto SQL Server on EC2. But the upside is this can also double up as your disaster recovery approach or solution. Now, finally, the one that gives you most flexibility is DMS. Database Migration Service allows you to achieve continuous data replication, CDC, change data capture, from your source database to any of the options that I've just talked about. So you can come onto EC2, RDS Custom with minimal downtime. So this is great for highly available applications. But when it comes to database migration, it goes hand in hand with modernization. If you run SQL Server today, I would guess that you would run it on Microsoft's Windows Server. Is there a way to save on licensing cost, at least on the Microsoft Windows Server side? Yes, there is. With Replatforming Assistant, this is a scripting tool. It allows you to export your SQL Server on Windows Server and restore it onto EC2 Linux, so you save on Windows licensing cost. But SQL Server itself is still quite expensive in terms of license. So what if you're thinking about moving the database, modernize it to open source alternatives such as MySQL, or more commonly PostgreSQL, such as on Aurora? You can use database migration service to migrate the data, but before you do that, you need to convert the schema, and we have a tool for that as well. As part of DMS, we have SCT, Schema Conversion Tool, that allows you to convert your SQL Server schema onto the PostgreSQL equivalent of, or any database of your choice. But up until now, you have to convert this manually using SCT, then orchestrate DMS manually, and what about your application code? Now, modernizing database without touching the application is considered a breaking change for your application, right? So you're gonna make sure that you tweak your application to make it work with PostgreSQL. Up until now, you have to orchestrate all this manually, but with that, I'd like to introduce to you AWS Transform for SQL Server modernization that allows you to use the generative AI to orchestrate and streamline all of these proven migration and modernization tools to modernize your database and application layer from Microsoft SQL Server to Aurora PostgreSQL. Okay, let's see this in action. So as you saw from Sasan's demo, the entry point to AWS Transform is to create a workspace, right? And you can create jobs within the workspace. The job that we are interested in is under this category called Windows Modernization, and we're gonna need to select the SQL Server Modernization option to create this job. Once the job is created, you can see that on the left-hand side, you really got a guided experience all the way from prerequisites to the actual wave run. This is an interactive experience. You can converse with the agent, and if you look at the prerequisites, it gives you clear guidelines. Now, for AWS Transform to work with your database, it's gonna need to access your database. It's gonna need a user for it to use to log in. So this is our source database. We have a few tables, and we have a user here. This user is going to be stored in Secrets Manager, and we're gonna tag it in a very specific way so AWS Transform can work with it. Within our database, we have a few tables, as I mentioned, and if I do a select statement here, you can see that we have some data in our table. On the application side, this is an entity framework SQL Server provider, and this is a web application that resembles a bookstore. Okay, now back in AWS Transform, in the prerequisites, it tells you how you should tag your secrets that contains your database credentials. So make sure that you tag it exactly. This is documented on our website. And as for the code, make sure that you have got code connections ready, set up onto your repository. This can be GitHub, GitLab, Bitbucket, Azure DevOps. Now, establish the connection to your database secret and the code connection from AWS Transform. Once you approve that, it will make sure to validate that all of the access is okay, IAM roles are okay, and then it will move on to discover your resource. As you can see, it has successfully identified that there is one database through this secret that it can access, and it has also accessed and found successfully the repositories that is associated with this database. Okay, now after it's done, then it's going to move on to the assessment phase, where it's going to look at the complexity of your database and application. So it's going to look at all of your database objects, determine its complexity, look at how your application access the database, making sure that it's able to do the wave planning, which comes next. Now, after the assessment is finished, you get a downloadable report. One of the aspects that you can download is the CSV file that contains a summary of what you have in your database. A well-formatted PDF report is presented to you as well. On the application side, you see your repositories, complexity rating, and high-level lines of code count. Once that is okay, you will move on to the wave planning phase. Now, I've only got one application and repository here, but if you have got multiple, the wave planning means that it will actually do application and database grouping. So make sure, human in the loop, make sure that you review this before you hit OK, because once you do so, it will move on to the actual wave run. The first task in the wave run is schema conversion. And you can get a Transform to create a new database for you, or you can select an existing database as target, as we do so here. Once you confirm that this is the database that you want to write to, hit OK, and under the hood, this will orchestrate schema conversion tool to convert your schema from SQL Server to Aurora PostgreSQL. Now, if you head over to PGSQL, on the Postgres side, we now have our book store schema. And if we expand that, all of the tables that you saw on the SQL Server side are now present here. But if I do a select statement, there's no data in these tables yet, which is natural because that comes next. Data migration, second step, and you can also ask AWS Transform to orchestrate data migration for you. What they will do is under the hood, instead of you manually having to create tasks in DMS, it will create and configure the DMS task for you to do the data migration. Once the data migration is ready, and if I select this table again, I will now see all of the data that looks exactly the same as the data that we have in the SQL Server side. What's next? Code, right? So it's gonna need to look into your code, it's gonna scan your code, do actual changes to your code, it's gonna write it into this new branch that you can specify instead of overriding your existing code, right? So it's gonna change the entity framework classes to make sure that it works with the new database. If you have embedded SQL code in your application, it will change that as well. It will swap out the connection string to make it PostgreSQL connection string. It will also validate the application. It will also resolve any build errors. If you have unit tests, it will run the unit tests for you. Once that is done, as I mentioned earlier, it will write the results into this new target branch, and you get a nicely downloadable report. This is, quite frankly, a detailed report. You can go project by project. You can even drill down to individual file changes within each project as part of this report. Now, let us switch over to our code repository. You can see that we now have this new branch created by AWS Transform. If we take a peek at the code changes that it has done, we can see that it has made all of the necessary class mapping from the entity framework side. If you scroll down, you can see that it has actually swapped out the SQL Server provider with a PostgreSQL provider. And it has also swapped out the connection string and links the connection string. So if you externalize your connection string, which is best practice, it will find those and it will swap out the secret for you as well. On the application side, before I show the application, I'm going to make a tiny change to the data on the PostgreSQL side to say that this book title now says 1002 instead of 1001 that you will see on SQL Server side to prove that the application is indeed talking to PostgreSQL, right? So if I start this application now and browse to the book, it should now say 1002 instead of 1001. So this application is definitely talking to PostgreSQL. Now, database. They don't exist in isolation. They go along with your application. So let's talk a little bit about your application. If you're a Microsoft shop, you might be running some legacy .NET Framework application with a mix of more modern cross-platform .NET application. Most likely you run this in Windows Server, maybe some Linux server. And you might have already started your journey towards containerization. You might have already started using these container technologies. So what are your options to run this on AWS? If you need full OS level access, you can run them on EC2 or Elastic Beanstalk. If you need automated patching, automated scaling. If you're on VMware, you can relocate your entire estate to EVS, like what Sasan have already touched on. Now, if you want to run containers, we have a lot of options. ECS, which is quite simple but powerful orchestration platform. EKS, if you want to run Kubernetes. If you run your containers on Red Hat OpenShift, you can continue to run it on AWS, on ROSA, Red Hat OpenShift on AWS. If you're on VMware Tanzu, you can run VMware Tanzu on Amazon EVS. Or you can also refactor to serverless event-driven functions such as Lambda. So how do you get from the left to the right? Of course, MGN, but it's less common when it comes to application. If you have access to your source code, you are most probably gonna use your CI/CD pipeline to deploy to these environments, and code pipeline and code deploy can facilitate these for you. Now, what if you want to use this opportunity to modernize as you migrate? Let's say that you want to containerize, re-platform, run it on containers, or you want to refactor, re-architect to embrace the more cloud-native architecture. This is where traditionally it gets quite complex because you have to manually orchestrate each one of these tools that solve one piece of the puzzle. Porting assistant for porting, app to container, containerization. If you want to break down microservices, you want to use another tool. So now we have AWS Transform for .NET that is really designed for transforming .NET framework application and make it .NET Linux ready. So this, in combination with AWS Transform for SQL modernization, gives you a full stack modernization capability that is assisted by generative AI. We also have Q Developer and Kiro, which is our coding assistant with agentic AI capability. Q Developer is available as extension in most of the popular IDE, and Kiro is a full-featured IDE with advanced agentic capabilities such as spec-driven development and agent hooks. So with that, I will hand it over back to Sasan to talk to you about the next workload.
Thank you, Adi. Well, the last but not the least important one, the file servers. What are we going to do with them? I mean, this section will be morely a review of the options you already have. First off, self-manage. Bring up your EC2. Make sure that you have proper tiers of EBS and the size of the EC2 that will support your throughput and transfer rates and the IOPS, and you'll be good. You want to offload some of its management tasks to us? You would go to the FSX system. If all you need is SMB with Windows under the hood, then FSX for file servers is the service to go. And if you need to go beyond that, meaning NFS protocol, iSCSI, tiered storage, and controls as such, then it would be Amazon FSX for NetApp ONTAP, the service that you'll be looking for. How you can migrate to them? You already have quite a few options. We talked deeply about MGN for the lift and shift. Depending on the target that you want to use, you might actually be able to leverage some of the native services in Windows environment, for example. DFSR, it has some integration capabilities with our FSX for Windows system. Or if you want to go to EC2, your other option could be the storage replica component of Windows servers. I mean, and if it's actually a very small one, you can simply use robocopy or use a third-party system and just do a manual copy. If it's too big to do it over the network, ship it to us. From Snowcone all the way to Snowmobile, we ship you the device, a secure device, you load it with data, ship it back securely to us, and then we will put it on Amazon S3 for you. And from there, you can decide what to do next with your data. And of course, the most straightforward service that we have for grabbing all this data is AWS Data Sync. Depending on what your source environment is, what access protocol it supports, SMB, NFS, or S3 compatible APIs, we would get those objects and we will sync it to our backend. And then depending on the target storage type that you want your data to be, we will just put it there for you. Really quickly, before we go to this summary, we just wanted to make sure that you know there are some programs and incentives available to you. Discuss these with your account managers to see if there are ones that you're eligible for, but they are there, and we want you to be able to leverage them for your migration projects. Overall, our whole purpose for this session was to make sure that your takeaway is that your questions might remain the same, but now, given the new tools and generative AI-based tools that we have answers for you, and we are by your side as a team of solutions architects, account managers, CSMs, and the wide network of partners that we have. We are here to help you make your migration journey easier. Specifically, you saw that how you can now offload some of your management to us with the hybrid Active Directory service that we have out there. You already saw a demo of wide capabilities that AWS Transform provides for you all the way along. And of course, we just talked about the programs and incentive. If there's only one slide that we want you to take away from our session, it would be this one. Here is an exhaustive and extensive resource of list of resources that will go deeper into every individual subsection that we talked today. We didn't dive deep into VMware or MGN. Those topics, we have some resources. Some of them are from this reInvent, and right now they point you to the catalog for you to attend. And later on, when we have the sessions recorded on YouTube, we will update this page to have the YouTube recording of all these footages, along with this one, of course. And you'll see some blogs, some technical notes, some training materials through our skill builder. So all of those we've combined here, and we want you to bookmark and go deeper into them if you're interested. And with that, I wanted to thank you again.